All right, so I'm going to start us off, and it's not just going to be me up here. There's a whole team of us that does Safe Sanctuary. It's people who are in charge of the children's ministry, the youth ministry, older adults, vulnerable adults, membership care, and I really appreciate everyone who RSVP'd to the training, who is going to be watching this training later, because it's super important because having a safe sanctuary is everyone's business. Like whether you come into contact with the kids all the time at this church or not, when anyone walks through the doors of our sanctuary, they need to feel like it is a safe space for them emotionally, physically, everything. So this training is really for everybody. So that's why we're going to make it widely available. We have it every year. So a lot of this information is going to be the same that maybe you have seen before, but we have added some new things, and we want to emphasize some new things. For example, a safe sanctuary is not just about the kids. It's about vulnerable adults. It's about all groups. So we're going to get started with our slides. So we can go to the next one. Okay. So I'm going to start us off with some really uplifting topics today. It's going to be awesome. Those of us who regularly come across children in our place of employment have probably already had trainings about this, but abuse and neglect is real, and there are differences. So it's important to know the difference between physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect. Physical abuse is intentional physical force that can result in physical harm, and I gave some examples there. So someone who comes in with like cigarette burns all up and down their arms, that's physical abuse. Sexual abuse, pressuring or forcing a vulnerable person to engage in sexual acts, and there's all different kinds of behaviors that can fall under the category of sexual abuse. Emotional abuse, some type of behavior that harms someone's self-worth or emotional well-being. People who are constantly name-calling, shaming, rejecting, withholding love from the kids, or any other vulnerable person, threatening. Neglect is failure to meet someone's basic needs, physical and emotional. Housing, food, education, access to medical care. As someone who worked in child welfare for like 14 years, the majority of reports fall under the category of neglect. Statistics-wise, there are reports that are all over the place, but neglect is one that shows up the most often. So as people who may come across vulnerable people in this church, we need to understand the difference between these things. So, next slide. All right, so we're going to talk about signs in children. Now, just because a child is displaying these signs doesn't necessarily mean that they are experiencing some form of abuse or neglect, but it may be worth speaking to them just to ensure that something isn't happening. Examples include changes in behavior, changes in school performance, not receiving help for medical problems after you've already brought it to the parent's attention, is always hypervigilant, always watching, lacking supervision a lot, overly passive, very withdrawn, little reaction to their parents, or is dropped off early, stays late, doesn't want to go home. Learning problems, things that cannot be attributed to specific other issues. So this is not an all-inclusive list, and this does not always capture those children who are experiencing abuse or neglect, but this is just like examples of things that you can be watchful for, and if something like this is occurring with people at the church, as a volunteer or someone who's working with them, just be aware, and you may want to also reach out to someone on the Safe Sanctuary team. So, next slide. Hey, but guess what? Abuse and neglect knows no age and knows no category. And so we also need to be watching out for vulnerable and older adults and what that may look like. So these are just some examples. It's common for older adults to be exploited financially. And that could be like a sudden change in their finances, altered trusts or wills, unexplained disappearance of funds. And this is my caveat. This is near and dear to Dr. Johnson's heart, and Dr. Johnson couldn't be here today. So if you have questions about older and vulnerable adults, I think the whole group will help try to answer those questions together, because this is not my specialty per se. But I think it is interesting to note that spiritual neglect is a real thing, and so the church or any other religious entity failing to provide the necessary spiritual care for the faith development and well-being of older adults. So there'll be plenty of time today that we're going to get into groups and kind of like unpack what this means and what this might look like for people at our church. Next slide. All right, so there are some signs of abuse and neglect in older and vulnerable adults. Things that you can see. Unusual agitation, maybe broken glasses, very poor hygiene, maybe they're dehydrated or look like they're dehydrated, a pattern of inappropriate dress for the weather, lack of communication, unresponsiveness. These are some things to look out for in older and vulnerable adults. All right, so why are we doing this training? Why do we want to be a safe sanctuary church? We have to protect the welfare of all vulnerable people when they're here at church, not just at church, but everywhere really. And so our policy was updated 2 years ago, and the most updated version really emphasizes that it's not just about kids, okay? So the Safe Sanctuary policy is about all vulnerable people. And so 2021, 2022, we did a huge overhaul of our policy. And so you will see that. You guys will all get a link to the policy just so you can see what we're talking about. But yes, we want to protect the safety and welfare of everyone while they're at church. Next slide. Basically, we want to demonstrate that we're committed to the safety of everyone while they're here. The physical, emotional, financial, and spiritual safety. And the unfortunate reality is, historically, churches have not been the safest of places, right? And so we all need to recognize that, and that's why we have this training every year. And while it may seem a little bit repetitive, we want to just acknowledge the fact that churches are not always the most safe places for all populations. So how can we, as new creation, not only address things when they come up, but help prevent things from happening in the first place? Next slide. So this is just a quote from the rights of the aging, from the social principles of the United Methodist Church. And it really spells out that society places a lot of emphasis on youth, but the social principles are trying to, or have integrated the aged into the life of the total community. And we want the church to really put more of an emphasis on this, that ensures that the aging can be age and respect and dignity. And so, yeah, that came directly from the social principles. Next slide. All right, we got Nicolette, who's going to come tell us about staff and volunteer recruitment.
All right, so a little bit about volunteer staff recruitment. Next slide. So all volunteers and paid staff working with children or youth or any vulnerable adults must meet the following criteria. You have to be at least 16 years of age and at least 5 years older than the age of the persons they're working with. You have to do this annual training, and you must do a satisfactory background check. Paid staff must be at least 18 in addition to the above criteria. Unpaid volunteers may work with children, youth, older adults, and vulnerable persons if they're at least 16 years of age and 18 years of age to work with older and vulnerable adults, and before with 16 at the best you have to be with children and youth. A member in good standing on the implicit reference of children's, youth, or older adult chairperson or the pastor, and must, yes ma'am. Oh, that better, thank you. Must also meet the above criteria of satisfactory background check and attendance training. Next slide. Background checks are done to determine current or historic child abuse or sexual misconduct, criminal records, violent or pedophilia behavior. Interviews are conducted by the leader of the program in which the applicant will work or by other persons designated by the program leader. Church policy and guidelines will be discussed during the interview, and results of this background check be reviewed by the pastor, safe sanctuary chairperson, and either the children's ministry or youth ministry chairpersons. Next slide. Specifically, individuals who have been convicted of physical or sexual abuse or neglect may not work with any church-sponsored activity or program for preschoolers, children, youth, or vulnerable adults. Next slide. My papers are sticking together. Selection information listed on the screen will be marked as such and stored in a locked location with limited access afforded to only church staff and others with the need to know. Next slide. All applicants to the paid staff will have to sign an authorization and request for criminal background check form and have to acknowledge receipt of in agreement with the youth, older adult, and vulnerable persons abuse prevention policy as part of the application process. And annually, of course, we have to do this training and have to do this part as the application process as well, and we will provide an electronic or written consent for a criminal background check. And I think that is it from me, and I'm going to pass it over to Sashir.
All right. Hi, everybody. So my section, I'm going to talk about some of the specific guidelines regarding practices of providing care for all of our vulnerable populations. So we can go on to the next slide. All right. So we have 2 responsible persons rule. Okay, and we want to make sure that we have 2 approved volunteers or paid staff must be present at all times when working with children or youth. All right, 1 must be an adult that's over the age of 21, and whenever possible, 2 individuals should be both over the age 18. However, given that we're, a smaller congregation, leadership has agreed that we could have a second volunteer between the ages of 16 through 18, and of course, they would have to have taken all the required steps that all of our adult volunteers are dealing with. And we, as the church grows, we may revise this policy to make it so that everybody has to be over 18. So, we'll play that by ear if when we need that adjustment. And also, if it's very important that if a group stays overnight for a church event, or a church-sponsored event and the group leaves the premises, we definitely need 2 or more individuals to be present. And you have to be extra vigilant, especially, regardless all the time, but especially when we have these off the church premises events. So with that being said, we got to have those 2 leaders in place and at least 1 male and 1 female if the group is a mixed gendered group. We want to make sure we have proper supervision for that. All right, we can go to the next one. All right. So, and again, the church shall make a concerted effort to recruit more teachers and volunteers so that there can be 2 adults in every classroom and every outing. And that's why we're doing this training. And we have a PAC training, so that's good. In order to prevent abuse of any kind, the responsible persons need to be more than just physically present. We want you to be an active participant. Okay, and actively supervise kids. So you just can't stand there, be on the phone, and kind of chill. We want you to be an active participant because kids are quick. Okay, so especially our little ones, they move fast. And in the middle school ones and high school, they move fast too. So yes, so that's very important. And in order to prevent abuse of any kind, just again, make sure we're present and active with all of our supervision duties. All right, we can go on to the next one. So when we talk about our check-in, okay, and check-out procedures, this is very critical because we want to make sure the appropriate people are picking up our children. So nursery-age children, the parents or staff will observe a written check-in and check-out procedure as outlined in the nursery policy manual. Preschool and elementary school age children, and they have ages 4+, must be dropped off and picked up from all activities by the parent/guardian or their designee unless another arrangement has been made with the teacher. We're going to get names of those caregivers who drop off our older adults to church events as well, okay? And we can go ahead to the next one. So when we look at openness and accountability, parents, guardians, or their designees, clergy, staff, caregivers may visit and observe any activity, classroom, or church-sponsored program for children, youth, or older and vulnerable adults at any time unannounced. So that's important to know. We want to have that open door policy for a reason, right? There must be access to a phone or a cell phone when groups are at or away from the church facility. The church office or authorized church representative will be given this number prior to the group's departure from church property. And like, for example, when we took the youth to Frankie's, we were, vigilant, and parents had access to our phone numbers, and if something came up, we were able to facilitate that. That's just an example there. So doors and windows, we always want to make sure that all classrooms and office doors will have a window or visibility from the hallway and remain open while occupied, and that's super important. All right, we can go to our next one. So individual meetings with children and youth, and we want to be particularly careful with that, right? So great care should be taken at any time there's a one-on-one interaction with youth or children. Interaction should always occur in an environment that's visible by other adults, right? That protects you and the child, all right? Another adult should be made aware of staff members' whereabouts and those whom they are meeting. Make sure that the youth or child is aware that they are free to discuss any aspects of the meeting with a parent or adult, especially if they are uncomfortable about anything that occurs, okay? We can go on to the next one. And I'm going to do Danita's portion with the bathroom policies. So with children, so young children, kindergarten and younger, and 1st through 4th grades will be escorted to the bathroom, and the door will remain open. It says one adult will stand outside the bathroom or the stall unless the child needs assistance. And we know that, of course, our younger kids may need assistance with the bathroom sometimes, so that's why that's there. The second adult outside the bathroom will monitor the other children. If an adult is assisting a child in using the restroom, the door will remain open. Note the children's room and the nursery share a dedicated bathroom. I just kind of wanted to ad-lib a little bit. This is particularly important, and especially when we have our younger populations. I've shared this in a previous training before, but my home church actually had an incident with a summer camp when I was a teenager, and we had another child assault another child sexually in the bathroom. So we can't take for granted that, oh, 2 kids are going in the bathroom. So this is why these things are in place to protect kids and protect adults as well. So unfortunately, we have those situations where those things may occur. So this is why our safe sanctuary policies are super important. So I just wanted to make sure that we have an understanding of that, because you just wouldn't think, but things happen, right? So this is why these policies are in place. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. So bathroom policy, youth, vulnerable adults. With adult permission, youth may go to the restroom one at a time. And that's why we had that one at a time part. During the youth group meetings, the class will be taken as a group. Adults will monitor the outside of the bathroom. A transgender identifying youth or vulnerable adult may use the restroom of their preferred gender. And for older and vulnerable adults, restroom may be easily accessible with visible signage. Okay, we can go on to the next one. All right, so physical contact. Physical affection should be appropriate to the age of the child, youth, older adult, and vulnerable persons. Touching should be initiated by the child or youth and should be appropriate to their needs for encouragement and comfort, etc. Ideally, touching and affection, can't talk today, should only be given when in the presence of other children's ministry or youth workers. It is much less likely that touches will be inappropriate or misconstrued as such when two workers and adults are present. And touching is open to observation. So that's something that, like I said, keeps the child safe, and it also keeps you safe as the adult. This is especially important when diapering a baby or helping young child change clothes or use of the restroom. Also, it's important, we have to ask permission to hug too. That's a good rule to have. I'm a hugger, so sometimes, we forget that and you just want to kind of love on everybody in the church, but we have to be conscientious of those things. All right, we can go to our next one. Oh, my bad, sorry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 We definitely have to work on that. All right. Rachel, you got a question?
That was a good point. Could you repeat that into the microphone?
You got a mic over there? You want me to pass the mic?
So yeah, all I was saying, I forgot we're recording, just making sure that we're asking children about the hugs. Because like I said, it's just a lot of times it'll kind of slide with the older woman, boy thing. Because I know when I was younger in church, it always happens. Like an older woman's like, oh, give me a hug, and you do not want to do it. And it seems small, but what ends up happening is those little actions start telling the kid that I don't really have the right to say no to people. So that's why, it just, like I said, with having a boy, I just kind of seen it slide with women. So if we could just really be specific about making sure that it's like kids are always asked, can I? But see, even saying, can I have a hug, suggests to a little child that you have to give it to them. So I think we have to be specific about how we're even approaching children about hugs, because a child will look to hug you, but if they're not even saying, can I, from an older adult, start suggesting, like, I'm not telling you have to, but I'm kind of suggesting. So that's just, I'm just kind of big about that.
Okay, good point. All right. So, did I read this one already? Wait a minute. Lost where it was. Okay, I was gonna say, did I switch this one? I didn't drink all my coffee, y'all, I'm gonna be honest with you. All right, so physical contact. As ministry workers, our behavior must foster trust at all times, just to be above reproach. A vulnerable person's preference not to be touched should always be respected, to Ernest's point, right? Church workers are responsible to protect vulnerable persons under their supervision from inappropriate touching by others. Church workers must promptly discuss inappropriate touching or other questionable behavior by other workers as well as other children with their ministry leader, staff member, or pastor. Older adults and vulnerable persons are to be protected from unwanted and inappropriate touching and affection. Okay? All right, next one. And outings away from church property, children and youth. All children and youth participating in out of town and overnight outings must have written consent, church permission slips, and medical release forms. Medical release and permission slips may be completed for 1 year period and must be renewed annually. A cell phone or a pager, we don't really use pagers anymore, but that's okay, should be available when groups are away from church property. One adult and other than the parent should never take a child or children on an overnight outing alone. That is something that is critical. I would also, I know the pastor has, we don't have this essentially in this policy, but I know the pastor has like a form if you are giving a child a ride too, to kind of help protect you as well. So that's something that can also be filled out additionally. All right, we can go on to the next one. Okay, so there should be a 1-to-7 staff to youth supervision ratio observed on any away from church outings, overnight outings. Female staff will supervise female youth in their sleeping quarters, and male staff will supervise male youth. Married couples will not stay together but observe the female-to-female and male-to-male sleeping arrangements. With the exception of a parent/child combination, a staff and youth will not occupy the same bed or sleeping bag. That's critical. Like, we're not going to do that. All right, next one. And we're going to pass it to Nikki. Oh, you want to use my phone? Yeah, I got the little thing. Just like that.
All right, we're going to talk about classroom discipline with children and youth. For example, like for the first one, if all teachers and workers that use the following discipline measures, so if a child is behaving inappropriately, just kind of redirect the child and to state to them that what they're doing is not expected. So for example, a child is throwing blocks. Just tell the child, we don't throw blocks. We just use those blocks for building. If this is not effective, the child will be guided and redirected to another activity. If that inappropriate behavior continues, they may be placed at a table to work along with other children. If the child's disruptive behavior continues after these steps, the teacher will notify the parents of this behavior and then also notify the children's ministry coordinator or SPPRC chairperson of the conversation, and no physical punishment or verbal abuse would be used at any time. And also, too, I want to note, other students and teachers shouldn't discuss the child being separated and continue with their activities as well. And we shouldn't ridicule. If isolating the child within the classroom or removal of the child from the room becomes necessary, the situation will be discussed as well. Next slide. Sometimes it may be necessary for adults or responsible persons working with children, youth, or older adults and vulnerable persons to provide basic first aid, such as like if a child has a scrape, clean it up or provide a Band-Aid. We'll keep a first aid kit around for all staff and volunteers to use. And an incident report, and there's one that is part of our handbook, to be filled out and presented to the child's parents, next of kin, or caregivers, so people are aware of any accidents that may happen. Next slide. So some other notes to kind of keep in mind with gifts. You must have parental or clergy prior knowledge to give gifts to any individual children or youth. Gift giving should be done on a group basis or for special occasions only. And please don't do any elaborate gifts. Going forward, this training, we have to do this every year, all of us, and any new paid staff and new volunteers have to do it as well. Any virtual activities that it can be conducted via video conferencing platform like Zoom or Teams, and those events should be password protected and have a waiting room feature enabled, and it should be at least one supervising adult, 21 years age or older, present to supervise any virtual activity. And any efforts will be made to work with older and vulnerable adults on communicating in cyberspace. Ooh, I think your phone locked. Your phone locked. Oh, no. Yeah.
All right, guys. So we have thrown a lot of information at you. You're probably like, wow, I knew a lot of this already. And some of it could be new. Some of it could be a little bit different than what you had learned before. That's fine. What I want us to do is to get into two groups. Let's see how we can do this, in our little rows. But what I want us to do is to think about So one of the main things we're going to need to know as volunteers and people working with vulnerable populations here is the signs and what to look for, and that was back towards the beginning of the slides. I want you guys to come up with a list, and this could be beyond what was put on the slides or from your personal experience, what you have seen. Developing a list for what to look for with vulnerable adults, so that'll be one group, and the other group will be developing a list for children. Sound great? Remember, if you're feeling sluggish, you can go get some snacks in the back. You can also do laps. All right. So I guess, could the first group go to the way back? And that could be Alvin, Pat, Tiffany, Felicia, Theus, Selena, Paulina, Nicolette, and Ernest. Go to the way back and do children, please. And then everyone else can be up front, and we'll be talking about vulnerable adults. Gracias. So, some things I noticed as an observer of this activity is the signs that we're talking about apply to everyone at the church, right? Like if somebody is displaying certain signs, like I think, Eugene, you mentioned like if a young lady appeared with some bruises in places that they were not supposed to have bruises, that would also be concerning. So I do think it's important, and you know, I can talk to the pastor. I mean, this is a hypothetical, but I think it would be helpful to maybe post, not like in the hallway, but maybe in the classrooms or something, you know, what to look for. So what did you guys come up with? What would you like to share out with the other group? And I will give you the mic, because since we're being, we have another one. Since we're being recorded, I want to make sure that the people watching this are able to hear.
Okay, the group in the back brainstormed a few things about signs of neglect and for children. Some of the things were already on there, but some of the things are definitely new. Don't want to leave. A change in behavior, for example, someone who's normally talkative, stopping talking completely. Change in physical appearance, maybe they got some bumps or bruises. Thick clothing or sweaters, maybe they're hiding some bumps or bruises. The child is overly friendly, insisting on being touched. Older children insisting on sitting on people's laps. Children with developmental issues, they maybe can't communicate abuse or neglect. How can we protect them is a question. And a child nodding off, sleeping all the time might be an indication of abuse or neglect.
That's good. All right, is someone from the group working with vulnerable adults want to share a little bit about what y'all talked about?
Thank you, Alice. We discussed some signs for vulnerable adults that would be concerning. Some signs include noticing dirty clothes, smelling, having bruises or skin tears in unusual places on the body, becoming more withdrawn or becoming more agitated than usual. In other words, we would notice changes in behavior. We might also notice someone losing weight. Their poor dental hygiene, so that would be their teeth look dirty and their breath smells more than it used to. And another thing we mentioned is if the adult has a caregiver and the caregiver is refusing visitors, so we can't find out what's actually going on. An example that was given is if our pastor is trying to visit and cannot get through the caregiver, if a person has stopped attending church, who used to be a regular churchgoer, I'm glad we have our member care team to help our pastor reach out to people. We also mentioned people who seem jumpy if they are touched lightly, or if they're just approached and someone just acts like they're on edge.
Thank you. All right, so I set us all up to talk about really the last part or the last piece of our policy. And so the majority of our policy, and you will see when you look at it, is about prevention. Is about like, we do not want anything remotely unsafe to occur here, but like, you know, we have to have a plan in place for if somebody comes here and we see that something's happening to them, or God forbid something happens to them here. So one of those two scenarios. So I'm gonna really share with you guys what we're gonna do about that. And so all of us really need to know some of these steps just in case. This is like the just in case part of the policy. So we can go to the next slides. Yeah, when the unimaginable happens. All right. So, you know, I think we all probably have thoughts and feelings about reporting abuse and what that may or may not look like for us, our community, our history, our culture, all of that. However, you know, from church policy says it's our legal and moral responsibility to report whenever it comes to our attention, regardless of where it took place, okay? So home, school, community, church, wherever. And it's a form of ministering to vulnerable individuals, and to report is to witness to the love and justice of God. And so, yeah, just keep that in mind, because not only is it a ministry, but it's also the law. So we'll go to the next slide. Yes, North Carolina is a universal mandated reporting state, and what that means is, you know, some states designate like teachers and police officers and doctors as mandated reporters. Well, North Carolina has said that if we know something, we are all mandated reporters. And so I put the law up there for you guys to see, and if you have any cause to suspect that anybody is being abused or neglected, you must report. So we'll go to the next slide. It's specifically around elder abuse. You guys are all gonna get a copy of these slides, so any like links or anything in there that you wanna check out, please feel free to do so. But the same goes for elder abuse. So it's not just for child abuse, also for elder abuse. Any person having reasonable cause to believe that a disabled adult is in need of protective services shall report such information. So the same for that as well. And, you know, there are those in the congregation, myself included, who have had to make many, many, many reports, and we can help you do that. Like, you know, that was my life for like 14 years. So I get that it's scary, and I get that it causes anxiety, but if there's something that needs to be reported, I can certainly help you do that. So go to the next slide. All right, so here's how we're gonna do it as a church. You know, like I said, the first point of defense is prevention in the first place. But, you know, sometimes there's things that happen outside of our control, and we have to ensure the protection of everyone at this church. So we need to disclose immediately. So if you're a volunteer, let's say you're on an activity with the youth group, and one of the youth discloses to you that they've been sexually abused at home, you immediately need to report that, but you also need to make sure that the head of the youth group immediately knows what's going on as well. So and then pastor, so we'll go there. So we're gonna ensure this by making sure that they are immediately okay. So no matter what's going on, you need to make sure that the person themselves is in a good space. Are they immediately safe, like sitting in pastor's office? Are they safe talking to some church members? Where is that person? Are they safe? So immediately ensure their safety, and then contact the pastor and the authorities in whichever order order you can get the people first, right? And so the authorities, well, we'll go to this on another slide, but yes, the person in charge of the event needs to know, but when I say the authorities, I mean like Durham Police Department or Durham DSS, or both. All right, so you're gonna make sure that you write down what was told to you. We need proper written documentation, and you are going to support with all of this knowledge by notifying the Durham PD or the Durham Child Protective or Adult Services. If you're not quite sure the steps to that, and like let's say a knowledgeable person is not available, like we spell it out here, but like your first point of defense is always to call the police department because they will route your call wherever it needs to go. Especially since, like, if you find out on a Sunday, like, after hours, Child Protective Services goes through the police department anyways. So, pastor needs to know. Now, here's the caveat. If the pastor is the accused party, we need to let the chair of the Staff Pastor Parish Relations Committee and the district superintendent know. So that would be Lisa Wells, who is providing childcare for us today. But, and you will be providing written documentation of everything. And we will make sure that all these numbers are posted. For example, yes, of course, we all know how to call 911. But if it's during the week or during business hours, I'd like everybody to also have the DSS numbers for Child Protective Services and Adult Protective Services as well, which I believe is on the next slide. Yes. Yeah. So these are the numbers that you will need. And the pastor or the designee, and sometimes the pastor's out of town or on vacation, so someone in the pastor's place will help notify the caregiver and what are the next steps. In previous trainings, we had questions about this because if the parents are the one that are abusing the child, what does that look like? Well, you're going to rely upon DSS to let you know what the next step should be in that situation. So it looks different depending on the different scenarios of abuse and neglect that we get. Because let's say it was a church volunteer who abused the child, well, the parents certainly need to know pretty much right away from the pastor. So it really depends on who is the one doing the thing, the abusing, and how are you going to handle that. So it's kind of one of those things where there's not always going to be the same protocol because it depends on the situation. Mm-hmm.
I was just going to add, the thing that I mentioned at my home church, when that incident took place, our pastor was away. So that was the time before the United Methodist Church was doing Safe Sanctuary. We had to scramble and figure it out as everybody who worked at the summer camp. That did not happen under my supervision, by the way. But there was another camp counselor that wasn't as vigilant, and that's why we were talking about active supervision. But we had to scramble and figure out who do we call. Oh, we got to get ahead of the pastor, and how do we contact the parents, and what do we do? So it's good that we have this plan.
Mm-hmm. The main issue is report it to the person in charge of the event and report it to the pastor, or bypass the pastor if it is the pastor. All right, next slide. Oh, yes. So these are good things to know about. Like, let's say that the child has accused a volunteer of abusing them. Then that person needs to be removed from any further involvement with the children and youth of the church while everything is investigated. The pastor will speak to them about that and also speak with the parents of the youth or the child about that to determine what's going to be the best course of action. So, there's pieces of this that are beyond the church's control. So once you report it to the proper authorities, they're going to do their job to investigate exactly what needs to happen next. But from a church standpoint, we have control over who is still volunteering and why and all of that, so we can make that happen. All right. Yes, so in case it comes to this, like I said, I hope we never have to use this part of the Safe Sanctuary policy, but it's there for a reason. So let's say that something happens and there's media inquiries. There's going to be a predetermined spokesperson for that, and that'll be determined with pastor. And there is going to be a written report that will have to be submitted to the bishop's office. But we're not going to do that, guys, because, you know, it's going to be, once again, there's things that happen outside of our control, and we always have to have a plan for that. All right. Are there questions about what I have just said about the steps for reporting abuse and neglect? Rachel?
Can we see the slide again with the reporting information?
You talking about the phone numbers? Yes. And this will go out to all the attendees as well. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Perfect. Yeah, take a picture with your phone, all that good stuff. All right. Yes, ma'am.
So when I started my career as a third grade teacher, I had an incident with a young man that came to school, and I saw some marks on his body, and they did not look like they would have been from anything quote unquote appropriate or, you know, something. And I remember, I mean, I just got to be honest, this kid was difficult, y'all. He was real difficult to deal with. And I remember thinking, whew, I could imagine his parents who probably did some things he probably wasn't supposed to do. And this was likely, I mean, I could quote unquote see what might have led to it in terms of his behavior. And I felt really conflicted because I knew his parents. They seemed to be great people, right? But I also knew my responsibility, and I had to report it. And I say that to say, it's not, like, if you're ever put in that position, and I hope none of us are, but if we're ever put in that position, just know it's not our responsibility to determine whether something bad happened or not. It is not our responsibility to pass judgment. It is not our responsibility to make whatever determinations. It's just our responsibility to report it. And the people who know more and understand it, and the great folks like Alice and her, support workers, that's their job. Our job ends, with the reporting. So I'm just saying, like, you're gonna feel, if you ever put in that situation, and again, I pray we aren't, but know that there's a lot of feelings that go behind that, but it's not for us to make some decisions. Well, it's probably not, or I can see where that happened, and all of this, that, and the other, but make the report if you're ever questioning it, and the people that have studied and know the law and know process and all of that can be the ones to take it from there.
Thank you for mentioning that, because that was another thing I wanted to just point out. Like, there are some really chatty children at our church, and they love to talk to us. And I could see them just coming up to us and saying, like, all kinds of things about what happened at home and all of that. I mean, and if anything comes out of that is concerning to us, then yes, like, we need to report that. However, we are not investigators, and we do not need to be asking leading questions or, like, bringing children down a rabbit hole where they're basically, they feel like there's no choice but to say, like, you're not saying, so basically, don't do the social worker's job for them, is what I'm trying to say. So if we have credible information that leads us to believe that something negative or something bad is happening at home, we need to send that information where it needs to go. But we don't need to continue to gather by our impetus, more and more information. That child may be sharing with us more and more information, or that adult, or whoever, but we just kind of need to be the receptacle for that, and not necessarily like the police investigator or the DSS investigator, because that's not our role. Yeah. Cool. All right, we got one more activity. And it's a fun one because, you know me, I'm a social worker. I love role plays. All right, You're tasked with developing a short role play where a children's church volunteer has been caught allegedly physically abusing a child in the church, giving out cruel and unusual punishments. Your group needs to have the following roles: somebody who discovers the abuse, the volunteer, the Safe Sanctuary Committee chairperson or somebody like that in the church, Pastor V, and the Durham Police Department. And how would you role play out? What would you do with that information that you found out? Hey, if there's people who are willing to stand up and be part of the role play and everybody else is willing to engage, yeah. Who wants to be the volunteer who discovers the abuse? Not everybody all at once. I know. I could put you guys in groups where there's just 4 of you and all of you have to be in the role play. I taught middle school. I know how this works.
I have the easy role because I just have to report it, so everybody else,
Yeah, so you just report it. All right, who's going to be that person in charge at church that day? They're all right. We got Kathleen. Who's going to be Pastor V? Who's going to be the representative who takes all the calls at the Durham Police Department? You want to be DPD? Okay. I didn't say you were an officer. I said that you were on receiving phone calls. All right, so group, what are we going to tell them to say?
As a volunteer who discovers the abuse, what is my role?
Okay.
Right. Do you want me to just start?
All right, so you went and you found Kathleen. What happens next?
Kathleen, I know you're really busy, but I know. I'm sure you got somewhere to go. But can we step to the side a little bit? Come into the little small gathering room. I know this is really awkward, but when I was going, I had to go to the bathroom. I had a lot of coffee this morning and everything like that, so I had to leave worship. Didn't want to do that, but anyway, I had gone to the bathroom, and then when I was coming out, I heard a lot of noise in the children's church room, so I happened to kind of peek in there for a little bit, and it was a children's church. It wasn't the nursery. You're okay, well, yo. She was just, Yo kept saying she wasn't there, and so when I peeked in, I saw the volunteer. It was. She had a student, she had her holding a whole huge stack of Bibles and standing on one leg. You know, kind of like old school back in the day, like, you know, the PE teacher would make you do if you weren't listening in class, like way back in the day. I don't know what was going on, but it just seemed really inappropriate.
Thanks so much for bringing this to my attention, Melissa. It sounds like it was a really stressful and upsetting situation. Is the child safe right now? Where is the child?
Well, I mean, this is after service, so I guess I don't know where I didn't.
They're home with their parents, and we.
Yeah. I think I saw them leave in the parking lot.
All right. Well, I suggest that you go ahead and write everything down, and I'm going to go pull in Pastor V so we can decide whether this is something that we need to report to the authorities or explore more with the teacher who was in the room.
I got to write it down? Like right now?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Like the people's, I don't want to get them in trouble though.
This is going to be held confidential. All of our.
anything.
No, it was the right thing to do. We all have a responsibility to keep the children safe, and it's better that we follow through on these things and make sure everybody is aware of our policies and following the policies and keeping our kids safe.
Okay.
So you write that down. I'll go get Pastor V.
Okay. Alice, I need your notebook.
Pastor V, I need to borrow you. I'm summarizing the conversation I just had with Melissa. Okay. Would you mind coming in and debriefing with us and figuring out next steps with the children's teachers and parents?
Of course.
Go for it.
So what am I supposed to do, folks? I'm Pastor V. I've got this information. What am I supposed to do? You got to call the popo with the parents. Okay, Ernest says it's been excessive.
So this, I can imagine a game in the Sunday school curriculum, actually, that requires the kids to like stand on one foot and balance Bibles, right? So maybe this is a situation where we actually want to pull the second teacher who was presumably in the room before we go reporting.
Before. And Gloria, what were you saying? So you're saying the same thing as Ernest, basically. He's saying it's kind of excessive.
So here's a couple of thoughts about that. Number one, anything that happens on the weekend has to go through the police department, whether it's a police issue or not, and then they'll forward it on to CPS. That's how CPS gets it, like on Monday morning. So even if you don't think it's a police situation, you still call on a Sunday because that's who you're supposed to call for after hours for Durham DSS. However, if you don't think it rises, this is my thing. Unless you have studied the Child Protective Services intake handbook extensively, like inside and out, you can always report something, and if they say this does not rise to the level of abuse, then you didn't do anything wrong. Like, they'll just screen it out, and then they won't address it, and then the church can address it however the church wants to address it. You know what I mean? So, like, there's nothing wrong with calling in a report that you think might be something, but you're not sure. The school social workers do that all the time because they don't really know our policies that well, and that's fine. You're not supposed to. Our policies are like 1,000 pages. So then the intake worker will decide with their supervisor, does this meet the definition of abuse or not? And if it doesn't, because it sounds like they don't have enough information for it to be classified as abuse, like is it ongoing or was it a one-time game, right? Like they don't have enough information to know whether this would be classified, then Durham DSS would screen it out. But like, it's not really our job to determine whether it would be screened out or not.
But in this situation, it definitely seems like before we go from, safe sanctuary to pastor to police, there's something that's happening here at the church level before the police would be involved.
There was presumably a second adult in the room, so we need
Sanctuary,
we need their perspective on what actually happened here. But yes.
Okay. All right, so let's make sure we talk to the second teacher. The teacher, in this case, we're going to imagine the worst. She says, yeah, she's kind of has a strange way of disciplining our children. I'm kind of concerned about that. I've worked with her before. So, therefore, Pastor V will make a phone call, Durham Police Department.
Are you calling or?
I'm calling. Yep, I'm calling. I guess. Okay. Is Pastor calling, or do you guys call? What's the process here?
Okay, rule of thumb for me, because I've screened a lot of reports, is the person with the most information needs to be the one who's on the phone reporting it. Now, they can call with the pastor. It could be a group call, like on speaker, but the person who witnessed whatever happened needs to be helping to report it. And I will say, those of you who are teachers, your principals need to understand that, because often what they do is they get the school social workers to report, and the school social worker has no idea what just happened. So it's nice if the teacher could also help report.
When do you get the parents involved?
Hey, it's all of our role play, so, feel free to chime in.
I'm calling the parents while I'm calling the parents while Melissa's calling the police.
Yeah.
Is there something happening outside?
Okay, something minor. Okay, something minor then. Okay, good. All right.
We're talking about too much crazy stuff for y'all to be looking outside. I'm from Fayetteville and been in Durham for a while. I'm like, what's happening outside? Who's out there?
Right. Okay. All right. So we've got the Safe Sanctuary Committee person calling the parents, and Melissa and Pastor are in the office on speakerphone calling the police department.
Ring, ring.
Good afternoon, 911. What's your emergency?
I actually, can I be connected to the non-emergency number, please? So pretend like we've done
Yes.
that. Okay, so I'm calling because I'm not sure about a situation that I witnessed today at my church, New Creation, 4701 Old Chapel Hill Road, Durham 27707. I think that's the address. So today at church, I happened to witness one of our volunteers. She had a student that was having to hold a lot of Bibles and stand on one leg. And after talking to somebody else, it sounds like that was something that this person has done a lot of, and it just seemed a little inappropriate, and we wanted to call and make a report.
Thank you for calling. I'm taking notes on this, and we'll route this to social services.
Thank you. All right. Awesome.
Awesome. Academy Awards. We'll remember you for the Academy Awards. Yes, and the lizard made an appearance in our role play. Okay, so Alvin, you have a question? Come here.
After talking to the other teacher that was in the classroom, would that be any harm with the pastor going to that individual, taking him in her office, and say, look, it was an anonymous tip. You know, somebody talked to me anonymously, saying that, you know, you had a student in there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you said don't be an investigator, yada, 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 but for a situation as such, couldn't that be appropriate as well?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, right? Because, like, you know, the purview of DSS and the purview of the church are different, right? And so, like, DSS may decide to screen it out because they don't have enough information to decide whether it's physical abuse or not. But, like, the church can certainly address it in whatever way the church feels is best for the children of the church. So in this particular scenario, I guess they talked to the other person and they said it had been going on for a while, which, like, leads me down a rabbit hole of, like, a million other questions, like, how long had we let that person do this, you know, that kind of thing. But that's another role play for another day. Yeah, right. But you're right. I think at any time, if there's anything that threatens the safety or well-being of a child or a vulnerable person, you know, the church can ask that volunteer to please not volunteer in that capacity anymore, for sure. Yeah, good point. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what questions do you have? What are some main points that you learned from the training? Could you tell me, if I asked you, what steps you would take if you found out about some abuse going on? This time I did throw the nursery under the bus. I said, could you tell me about some ways that the church is intentionally attempting to prevent abuse from happening in the first place?
I think physically the nursery setup, that we keep the door open, there's the gate there so we can keep the little children's, you know, contained. But I think that for sure is something, as well as when we do children's church, that door also remains open. And there are times even the doors in between can be open unless, of course, a child is using the restroom.
Yeah, and we do a really good job with the two-person rule, too. Oh, okay, same wavelength. Great. Yes, this training right now is a way that we prevent things from happening. And so having the policy itself, yes. And I really like that the whole committee was very willing to completely change the entire policy to make sure that we included vulnerable adults, because that is also a big part.
The trustees are doing our part as well, because in our building use policy, we mention safe sanctuary, in that we ask that whoever uses the space also abides by that as well, even if it's an outside group.
That's awesome. So do you guys have ideas about other strategies, protocols, things that need to be added? And if you can't think of it right now, you can also email me.
So this is not about your this is not about your question of suggestions. This is really an announcement that we keep a copy of the safe sanctuary policy in the children's room in a folder that's on top of the bookshelf. But I tend to not remember, because I haven't had to use it, where the first aid kits are. You probably know where. There's probably one in the nursery, right? There's a first aid kit in the nursery, and where's another first aid kit? In the kitchen, okay. And there's a copy, and I hope you all know where you can find the copy of the Safe Sanctuary policy online. Actually, Alice sent a link to it, right?
It's through the church website, but everyone who attends this training will be getting access to it through a link that you could just save it to your Google Drive or wherever you want to. You keep stuff on your phone, whatever electronic way you want to save it as well. Yeah, and the hope is we don't use it, but we have it just in case we need to use it.
Okay, another thing this church does that helps keep us all safe, which I mentioned briefly earlier, is our member care team, to have every single member assigned to a person to check up on them, to communicate with them, to find out if they're doing okay. That helps our pastor also know if anybody needs anything. And of course, if a member of the care team is not getting a response, is reaching out to one of their members and not getting a response, that's a red flag right there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Alvin?
Another suggestion is to have that safe sanctuary policy posted up in each classroom, in the hallway, and in the narthex.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Thank you. All right. So marinate on these questions. Please email me if you think of other things. I'm very open to making edits to the policy as needed, additions that need to be added, things that need to be added as things come up. I will be sending you guys all a Google form, and it is not a quiz. I know those of you who have done it in the past have taken like a really difficult quiz. It is more an evaluation of how you think today went, but also it is an attestation that you have read the Safe Sanctuary policy and you agree to abide by it. So it is imperative that you return it back to us and that you complete it, because we do need to basically have on record that you attest. Also, if you're going to be volunteering in a capacity with anybody under the age of 18, make sure that your background check is current with Melanie in the main office, and communicate with the people who are over your ministry to make sure that you're good there. And if you know people who were not here today who volunteer regularly, make sure that I get their information. I'm going to be sending out the recording to people who were not able to make it. Anything else? Huh? Oh yeah, the next slide is a QR code, so I'll put it up for the evaluation. I'm a newbie to this, so it might not work. We'll see. I will be sending it to you too. Oh yeah, all right. Oh. Awesome, thank you. Thank you for coming.